What if everything we were told about Lucifer was wrong? What if he was never meant to be the symbol of evil, but a messenger hiding an ancient truth about the soul, a truth about why we keep being born again and again? And what if this truth was hidden from us for centuries, buried under fear and misunderstanding? The name Lucifer usually makes people think of the devil, of pride and punishment. But to some ancient Gnostic thinkers, Lucifer was not a monster. He was the bringer of light, a symbol of awareness, of the spark that lives inside every human being. They believed this light was trapped in a repeating cycle, a kind of spiritual wheel that keeps turning, forcing the soul to return to the material world, lifetime after lifetime. So what is this wheel of light? Why did ancient texts describe it as a circle of fire that holds the soul inside matter? And could it be that Lucifer's light actually means the part of us that remembers who we really are, even when everything around us tries to make us forget? In this video, we're going to explore one of the most surprising ideas from Gnostic writings, that the story of Lucifer is not about evil, but about reincarnation and the soul's journey through the endless cycle of life and death. Stay until the end, because what you'll hear might completely change the way you see life, death, and your own purpose. Before we begin, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications. By doing that, you're not just supporting this channel, you're joining a group of people who want to uncover the truths that were hidden from us for thousands of years. To understand the Gnostic message behind Lucifer's wheel of light, we first need to see how his image was transformed over time. In the oldest traditions, the word Lucifer simply meant light bringer. It came from the Latin lux fer, the one who carries the light. It referred to the morning star, the planet Venus, rising before the sun. It was a symbol of enlightenment, of the moment light appears after darkness. But later, religious systems turned this symbol into the complete opposite, a warning of rebellion and eternal punishment. The Gnostics believed this change was not random. To them, it was part of a larger effort to hide a deeper truth, that the light within us, the divine spark, was not meant to serve the powers of this world. In their view, the material world was created by the demiurge, a false god who trapped the divine essence inside human bodies, making us forget our origin. Lucifer, then, was reinterpreted as a threat because he represented the awakening of that inner light, the knowledge that could set the soul free from the system that controls it. Over time, the story was rewritten. What was once a symbol of illumination became a story of punishment. The light bringer was now called the Fallen One. The Gnostics saw this as a distortion, a spiritual inversion. They believed that by turning the bringer of light into the ruler of darkness, the true rulers of this world, the Archons, could keep humanity blind and obedient, trapped in the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. If this is true, then the question becomes, who wanted us to fear the light? Why would awakening be portrayed as rebellion and ignorance as faith? And could it be that the story of Lucifer's fall is not about a being cast out of heaven, but about the human soul falling into matter, into this physical world, only to begin the long journey back toward the source of light? The Gnostics warned that most people would never notice this pattern. They would live, die, and return again, without realizing they were part of a vast spiritual cycle. That cycle, they said, is the true meaning of the wheel of light, the endless motion of the soul through worlds of illusion, until it remembers who it really is. According to Gnostic writings, before the soul entered the body, it existed in a pure state of light, part of the eternal source, often called the pleroma. In that state, there was no pain, no division, and no forgetfulness. The soul was complete. But something happened, a fall, a descent into the material world. The Gnostics described this as the moment the soul became trapped inside the wheel of light, a circular movement that represents the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. They believed the demiurge, the false creator god, built this wheel as a kind of prison. Every time the soul forgets its divine origin, it becomes stuck in the rotation of the wheel, forced to return again and again. Each lifetime becomes another opportunity to remember the truth, but also another chance to fall deeper into illusion. To the Gnostics, this cycle was not a punishment from a loving God, but the result of ignorance, agnosia, the opposite of gnosis. When you forget who you are, the world keeps pulling you back into its system. So what exactly is the wheel of light? It is the path of the soul through time and matter, shining like a spark, but constantly fading under the weight of human desires, fears, and attachments. The light in the wheel is the divine essence, while the wheel itself is the trap, the constant repetition of life and death inside the false reality built by the demiurge and his archons. This is why some ancient texts call the world a spinning illusion or a circle of fire. The light turns endlessly, but it never escapes, not until awareness breaks the cycle. Lucifer's role in this story becomes clearer here. To the Gnostics, he wasn't the cause of the fall, he was the reminder of it. The name Lightbringer symbolized the moment when a person begins to see the truth, that the light they seek in heaven is already inside them. Lucifer's illumination was not about pride, but about awakening. The moment you realize that you are more than the body, more than the system, and that the way out of the wheel begins with knowledge of the self. This idea changes everything. It means that reincarnation isn't simply a natural process or a test. It's a signal that the soul is still asleep. And the key to breaking free is not worship, but remembrance. When the Gnostics spoke of salvation, they didn't mean being saved by an external God, but by knowing, truly remembering the divine light within. So the next question becomes, if the soul is trapped in this wheel, who keeps it turning? Who benefits from our constant forgetting? In Gnostic teachings, the world we see, with all its beauty and pain, is not the final or true reality. It's a construct, a kind of simulation created by beings called the Archons. These Archons serve the demiurge, the false creator god who formed the material universe as a copy of the divine realm. But unlike the original perfect world of light, this imitation was made of ignorance and control. The purpose of this system, according to the Gnostics, is to keep the divine spark, the soul, asleep, trapped in cycles of birth and death, unaware of its true nature. They describe the Archons as invisible rulers, powers that influence the human mind and emotions. They don't need to appear as monsters or demons. Their work is more subtle. They keep the soul distracted with fear, desire, and attachment, anything that binds it to material existence. Every time a person identifies only with the body, or with social and emotional roles, the Archons gain strength. The soul forgets its origin and continues to spin inside the wheel of light, believing that this physical world is all there is. In some ancient texts found in Nag Hammadi, like the hypostasis of the Archons and the Apocryphon of John, the Gnostics describe how these entities govern not only the material world, but also the process of reincarnation. When the body dies, the soul rises through the spheres, but each sphere is ruled by an Archon, who questions it, tests it, or pulls it back down. Only a soul that has gained true gnosis, direct knowledge of its divine origin, can pass through and escape the cycle. Without that awareness, the soul forgets again, and the wheel turns once more. This idea can sound strange today, but it reflects something deeply psychological. Even now, most people live in patterns that repeat endlessly, chasing the same desires, suffering the same fears, reacting the same way to life's challenges. The Gnostics would say that these are signs of the soul's sleep, evidence that the Archon's influence continues. The system feeds on repetition, on people living automatically without awakening. That's why Lucifer's symbol of light is so dangerous to the false powers. It represents awareness, the ability to see through the illusion, and remember that we are not meant to be slaves of the wheel. Some scholars interpret this story not as a literal belief in cosmic beings, but as a spiritual map of consciousness. The demiurge represents ignorance. The Archons are the inner forces, greed, pride, fear, that keep us bound. And the light bringer, Lucifer, is the impulse to awaken, to remember, to question the false order. Seen this way, the Gnostic myth becomes a psychological and spiritual guide. The soul must face its own rulers to reclaim its freedom. But the Gnostics didn't stop there. They also left clues about how to awaken, how to break the cycle of reincarnation and escape the Archons' control. That is what we will explore next, the hidden knowledge, or gnosis, that reveals the path out of the Wheel of Light. For the Gnostics, the key to escaping the Wheel of Light was not belief, ritual, or obedience. It was gnosis. This word doesn't just mean knowledge in the intellectual sense. It means direct, inner knowing, a deep remembrance of where the soul truly comes from. Gnosis is the moment when the light inside a person recognizes itself, when the illusion of separation begins to fade. According to the Gnostic texts, this awakening is what Lucifer's light really symbolizes, not rebellion against a divine order, but the illumination that shows the soul the way home. They taught that the demiurge and his archons keep humanity asleep by surrounding the soul with forgetfulness. This forgetfulness is what causes people to live only for material goals, to seek meaning only in possessions, status, or pleasure. The world becomes a maze of distractions that keeps the mind busy and the heart empty. But the moment one begins to question, who am I, really? Where did I come from? Why do I feel this constant longing for something beyond this world? That is the spark of gnosis beginning to burn. The Gnostics believed that this inner questioning was not a sin, but the first step toward freedom. The process of awakening was described as remembering. The soul, they said, has forgotten its divine nature, just as someone might wake from a dream and not recall who they were before sleeping. Practices like meditation, contemplation, and self-observation were meant to help the seeker remember. In the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, one phrase captures it perfectly. When you know yourselves, then you will be known, and you will understand that you are children of the living Father. This was the essence of gnosis, self-knowledge as divine knowledge. Lucifer's light, in this sense, is the spark that ignites that remembrance. It is not about worshiping an external being, but about awakening the light that the Archons have tried to keep hidden within. To the Gnostics, the soul's task was to turn that inner light toward the truth and follow it back to its origin, beyond the illusions of matter and time. When that happens, the soul no longer needs to reincarnate. The wheel of light stops turning, and the spark returns to the source. Modern thinkers often interpret this in psychological or symbolic ways. Some say the wheel represents the unconscious cycles we repeat, habits, fears, traumas that keep us bound to suffering. Gnosis, then, is the act of becoming aware of those patterns and breaking them through understanding. When you know the forces that control you, they lose their power. Awareness dissolves illusion. And this is why the story of Lucifer, as the bringer of light, becomes so profound when read through the Gnostic lens. It's not about defying God. It's about awakening from ignorance. It's about seeing through the systems that profit from our blindness, spiritual, social, or personal, and realizing that the divine spark never truly fell. It was only covered by layers of illusion. But awakening is only the beginning. Once the soul starts to remember, it must face the resistance, the forces that don't want it to be free. That is the next part of the revelation, the battle between the awakened light and the powers that try to pull it back into the wheel. Once the soul begins to awaken, the struggle truly begins. In Gnostic thought, the greatest threat to the false powers of this world is a human being who starts to remember who they are. The moment someone recognizes that they are not just flesh and thought, but a fragment of divine light, the system built by the demiurge begins to lose its hold. But the Gnostics warned that this awakening does not happen without resistance. The same forces that keep humanity asleep, the Archons, the rulers of illusion, immediately rise up to pull the soul back into ignorance. These Archons, they said, act through the structures of the world: fear, social control, distraction, and doubt. Whenever someone begins to look deeper, life suddenly becomes noisy. Responsibilities, temptations, and emotional chaos appear to steal attention. Even well-meaning people might tell the seeker to stop questioning, to just live normally. The Gnostics saw this as part of the trap, the way the world defends itself. The system cannot survive if too many souls wake up, so it constantly feeds us new forms of confusion and attachment to keep our focus downward, not upward. In symbolic language, Lucifer's light begins to shine inside the human heart. But the false rulers surround it with shadows, fear of judgment, fear of loss, fear of being different. They use guilt to make awakening feel like rebellion, and truth feel like sin. This is why the Gnostics said that liberation begins not by fighting the outer world, but by facing the inner one. Every negative emotion, every selfish desire, every blind belief becomes an Archon within us, a small ruler holding a piece of the soul captive. To defeat them, one must see them clearly and no longer obey. This inner battle was described in many ancient texts as the War of the Light. It was not about violence or weapons, but about consciousness. Each time the soul chooses awareness over instinct, love over fear, truth over comfort, it weakens the system that binds it. The wheel of light keeps turning for those who live unconsciously, but for those who awaken, the motion slows. They begin to see through the repetition, to recognize the same lessons appearing lifetime after lifetime, until understanding finally breaks the pattern. Even today, the same dynamic can be seen in ordinary life. The moment someone begins to question society's rules, religion's dogmas, or their own habits, they face resistance from outside and from within. But that resistance, the Gnostics said, is proof that the light is real. The system only fights what threatens its control. So the battle is not a curse. It's a sign that the soul is close to remembering its true freedom. Lucifer's light, in this sense, is the courage to question. It's the ability to hold your own truth, even when the world calls it heresy. To the Gnostics, this was not pride. It was faith in the divine spark within. They believed that when enough souls awaken, the wheel itself will collapse, because illusion can only exist when minds remain asleep. But to reach that point, the seeker must go beyond knowledge. They must live in awareness, to see the illusion, but not feed it, to walk in the world, but not belong to it. In the next part, we'll see how the Gnostics described this state of freedom, the moment when the soul rises above the wheel and remembers the light of its true home. According to Gnostic thought, the true purpose of human life is not to perfect this world, but to wake up from it. The soul, they said, did not come here to build empires or to collect experiences endlessly. It came to remember itself, to find the way back to the realm of light. The material world, ruled by the demiurge and his archons, is like a dense fog. It makes everything look real, solid, and final. But behind it, there is something eternal, the pure, luminous realm called the pleroma, the fullness of divine being. That is where the soul truly belongs. Freedom from the wheel begins when a person stops identifying with what constantly changes the body, possessions, opinions, and emotions, and starts realizing that the core of their being has never changed at all. The Gnostics said that this divine spark, hidden inside every human, is a fragment of the same eternal light that created all things. When someone recognizes that truth not only in the mind, but through inner experience, the illusion begins to break. The wheel still turns, but it no longer carries them with it. To the Gnostics, the world is like a classroom that repeats its lessons until they are understood. Every pain, every desire, every loss is a mirror showing the soul what still holds it down. Reincarnation happens because most people never truly learn the lesson. They keep mistaking the illusion for reality, chasing satisfaction in the outer world instead of awakening the inner light. But when the lesson is understood, when one realizes that true peace does not come from having more, being admired, or being right, the soul begins to detach from the forces that pull it back into matter. The chains of the Archons weaken, and the path to freedom opens. Some Gnostic writings describe this awakening in vivid symbols. They say that as the soul rises through the spheres after death, each Archon tries to stop it, demanding recognition or worship. But the awakened soul, armed with gnosis, answers each ruler with the truth. You have no power over me. I came from the light, and to the light I will return. When the soul remembers the divine name, the vibration of its origin, it passes through the barriers unharmed. The final moment of liberation is described as emerging with the eternal flame, when individuality dissolves into pure consciousness and the soul becomes one with the source again. In a more modern and symbolic view, this ascent can be seen as a deep transformation of awareness. The Archons are not only cosmic entities, but also patterns of thought, fear, anger, pride, guilt, that keep us repeating the same emotional lifetimes. When those patterns are dissolved through understanding, forgiveness, and awareness, the cycle ends within us. The Gnostic path is not about escaping the world physically. It's about awakening while still living in it, seeing through the illusion, but continuing to act with compassion and clarity. In that sense, Lucifer's wheel of light becomes a map of human evolution. The light that once fell into matter begins to rise again, carrying with it the wisdom gained from the experience of separation. The fall and the return are part of one great process, the divine exploring itself through creation and remembering itself through awakening. The Gnostics saw this not as despair, but as hope. Even if the soul forgets 1,000 times, the light within it never dies. Each lifetime, each experience, carries a hidden chance to awaken. When that awakening happens, life itself changes. The person no longer seeks salvation outside, but feels it quietly burning inside. They see through the games of the world, but they also see beauty in everything, because everything becomes a reminder of the light trying to return home. The Gnostics called this state being in the world, but not of it. The body remains here, but the heart already lives in eternity. And so the wheel, which once represented imprisonment, now becomes a symbol of transformation. It no longer spins in ignorance. It turns in harmony as the soul finally moves with purpose, guided by the inner light that never stopped shining. This is the real meaning of Lucifer's light, not rebellion, but remembrance. Not pride, but liberation. If we look back on everything we've uncovered in this journey, from the distortion of Lucifer's image to the meaning of the wheel of light, one truth becomes clear. What humanity calls evil may have once been the symbol of our own forgotten divinity. The story of Lucifer, when seen through the eyes of the Gnostics, isn't about the triumph of darkness. It's about the tragedy of forgetting and the beauty of remembering. For thousands of years, we've been taught that salvation lies outside of us, that someone or something must rescue us from sin, death, or the material world. But the Gnostics turned that idea inside out. They said that the Savior is already within, the true Christ, the true light, and even the true Lucifer, the light bringer, all point to the same reality, the divine spark buried inside every human soul. The battle between heaven and hell is not happening somewhere else. It's happening inside us, every moment, through every choice we make, between awareness and sleep, between love and fear, between remembering and forgetting. When the Gnostics spoke of the wheel of light, they weren't describing a punishment. They were describing a process, a cosmic school where souls evolve through experience until they finally awaken. But the tragedy, they said, is that most souls forget why they came. They get lost in the noise, in the illusions of power, pleasure, and control. The demiurge, the false god of this world, wants the wheel to keep turning forever, because the wheel feeds on ignorance. As long as people keep identifying with their bodies, their titles, their religions, or their fears, the system continues to spin, and the light stays hidden. That is why Lucifer's light was feared, because once a person sees the truth, truly sees it, they cannot be controlled anymore. An awakened soul no longer serves fear. They don't need approval or external salvation. They begin to live from the light within, and that light shines through the illusion, exposing the game that the Archons built. This, the Gnostics said, is what liberation looks like, not escaping to another world, but waking up in this one. Think about what that means for your life right now. How many times have you felt like you are reliving the same problems, the same relationships, the same emotional cycles, as if life itself were repeating lessons you didn't ask for? That, the Gnostics would say, is the wheel. It's not only about coming back after death, it's about coming back to the same states of mind until you finally see what you were meant to learn. Every time you forgive instead of hate, every time you seek truth instead of comfort, every time you choose awareness over distraction, the wheel slows down, the cycle weakens, the soul begins to remember, and that memory changes everything. You begin to see that the light bringer is not your enemy, but your reflection, the part of you that still carries the spark of the original flame. You understand that heaven and hell are not future places, but states of consciousness. You realize that the real fall was not Lucifer's, it was ours. We fell when we forgot who we are, and we rise again the moment we remember. This is why the ancient texts spoke so carefully in symbols, because this truth cannot be forced on anyone. It must be discovered from within. The Gnostics believed that even one awakened soul radiates enough light to help others begin to question, to feel that same pull toward truth. That's how the chain of awakening begins, one light igniting another, until the darkness fades on its own. That, they said, is the hidden purpose of the Wheel of Light, not endless imprisonment, but eventual liberation through remembrance. Some scholars today see this story as pure myth, but whether you take it symbolically or spiritually, its power remains. It reminds us that what we call reality might not be the full picture, that there are forces, both visible and invisible, that shape how we think, believe, and live. And if that is true, then questioning is not rebellion, it is sacred. Doubt, in the Gnostic sense, is the beginning of vision. Lucifer's fall becomes the story of every soul that dares to question the system of illusion, and every soul that day rises again through the light of understanding. Now, the question is not what happened thousands of years ago. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you keep turning in the wheel, repeating the same patterns, or will you begin to look for the light within yourself? The Gnostics believed that every act of awareness, every honest question, every inner silence, every moment of clarity creates a crack in the system of the Archons. Through those cracks, the divine light begins to return to the surface, and with every awakened soul, the illusion of the false world loses its grip. So, the next time you hear the name Lucifer, instead of thinking of punishment or rebellion, remember what the ancient seekers tried to tell us. The light was never the enemy. The real enemy is ignorance, the forgetting of who you are, where you came from, and what you carry inside. The Gnostic path isn't about worshiping anyone. It's about knowing yourself deeply enough that no external power can define your worth. Because once you remember, no force in heaven or on earth can take that truth away. And that brings us to the final call of this revelation. If this message resonated with you, if something inside you felt that strange pull of recognition, then you are already part of this movement of remembrance. By liking, commenting, and subscribing, you help this hidden light reach others who are still searching. You become part of a circle of souls, keeping these ancient truths alive, spreading the spark that the Archons tried to bury. Tell us in the comments, do you think the story of Lucifer is really about the soul's awakening? Have you ever felt that you've lived this life before, or that something inside you is trying to remember? Your voice matters, not because of the algorithm, but because every shared insight becomes another beam of light in this growing network of awareness. Stay curious, stay awake, and never stop seeking. Because the journey doesn't end here. The wheel keeps turning until we learn to rise above it. And when enough of us do, maybe the whole world will remember what the Gnostics tried to tell us long ago, that the divine spark was never lost, only forgotten, waiting for the moment we dare to see it again.